In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at how we can start creating some very simple silhouettes for top-down characters. So I want to create this lecture to really just stress the importance of visualizing your image from a silhouette before adding any kind of detail. So if we look at these sprites that I've created, you'll notice that every silhouette is quite different from the last. Even with these two characters over on the left here, you can still notice a lot of differences. The character on the left is a lot taller and more slender compared to this more bobblehead, chubby style of silhouette. Of course, this is also a lot different from the two on the right side, being a lot more slender, with the character on the left having a very, very small head and the character on the right having a bigger head to characterize it a little bit more. Finally, the sprite in the middle is completely different from all of the other sprites, and that's because this is a little bit less of a humanoid character, and so this is more of an imp or gremlin style of silhouette. We'll be creating our own silhouettes later in this lecture, but typically what I like to do once I create a silhouette is I will start to actually fill in where I see the eyes for my characters. This just allows me to not only visualize where the center of my head is, but it really gives me an idea as to what I'm actually working with and where the perspective of the head is facing. Now going to the full render of the image, you'll obviously notice that these sprites are completely different. But as you get better at pixel art, you actually can visualize the end result before even seeing any real detail. All right, heading over into LibreSprite, I'm going to create a new file so we can start making our own silhouettes. So 16 by 16 is a very standard size for characters, and it's typically what I like to use as it keeps things pretty easy to animate characters, as we will be doing later on. But with that aside, for now, we're just focusing on silhouettes and trying to set up a basic form for our character. So let's head in with the 16 by 16 canvas, and I'll just move these things around a little bit. I'll put the preview tab up here, and we'll just zoom in so we have a good look on our canvas. Now, because we're creating a silhouette, I like to only stick with one color. So we'll use one color, we'll create our little silhouette, pick a color, whatever color you'd like, and we'll start creating our basic silhouette. So I'll start with the head of the character. I'm just gonna leave 1 pixel height of room, just so that when we do add our outline in later, we still have enough room on our canvas. So I'll make a little rectangle. This doesn't have to be perfect, but something like that will work for sure. And then we're gonna add in a super small neck. So it's just 1 pixel below. And yeah, that's about all we need for the neck. Now for the torso, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create another rectangle. And so this is going to encompass the chest right here. And then we can bring this in ever so slightly to create the rest of the stomach area of our character. We might adjust this later on, but for now, this is looking pretty good. Now creating the legs, it's pretty simplistic, but I'll just draw a rectangle all the way down, and then we'll just jut out a few pixels for the feet. And if you'd like, you could actually extend this a little bit by showing a little bit more of the under thigh, and I'll give him a bit more on the feet as well. So we'll do the same thing for the other side. And there we go. Now we have a head, a neck, a torso, and some legs. So the final thing to do is add in the arms. So typically when I'm creating arms, I'll just kind of throw them off to the sides and keep them on a diagonal angle, as currently we are working with a front-facing view. If you'd like to play around with some new features like bigger hands, but I do think that this plays into a cutesy style of character, which is why I'm playing around with these proportions, having smaller arms, bigger feet, a squared off big head. I do think that this works perfectly okay, as we are creating a more cutesy style of character in the 16 by 16 pixel sizing. So now that we have our basic form and structure for the silhouette of our character, the last thing to do is just add in some eyes so that we can again see kind of where the center of the face is, where our character is facing, what he's looking at. So I'm going to swap over to the white color here. And mainly for eyes, I usually like to just dot with 1 pixel for an eye. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of the head, and I'm just going to come out 1 pixel to the right and 1 pixel up. And we'll just do the same thing on the opposite side just to keep things symmetrical. And there we go. So that's a super simple way just to create some eyes for our character. Now, if you'd like, you can play around with maybe a 2 height style of pixel for your eyes, or you could even play around with the positioning of the eyes. So we could move the eyes up, and now it looks like our character is looking upwards. Whereas before, if we have the eyes down here, looks like our character is looking down more towards his feet. So keep this in mind when you are trying to work around with different personalities for characters. Another thing you could do is actually shift the eyes over to a direction. So now it looks like our character is actually looking over to the right over here. Since we are working with a top-down view for this character, I'm just going to keep his eyes symmetrical on both sides, but I do like the double height pixel for the eyes, so I'm going to keep it like this. And that is how we can create our silhouettes. What I will do is slightly change our character's proportions. And so in order to do this, what I'm going to do is actually increase the entire canvas's size so that I can make a longer, more slender style of character. So I'm going to come up to the top and click on this sprite tab here. And then I'll move down to canvas size so we can resize the canvas. And I'm just going to stretch this canvas out. You can do this by either dragging on this blue grid square here, and that's going to increase the canvas size, or you can just type in the number and see where you want to actually center your canvas. So I'll center it from the bottom so that our character doesn't actually move his position at all. There we go. So now we have a taller canvas to work around. I'll go into my selection tool by pressing the M key on your keyboard, and I'll just push this character's proportions up, and then I'll just slightly tweak around the character's legs. So we'll make the legs quite a bit longer, but maybe we can bring the torso in. So just playing around with features, I'll give the chest more room, and I'll make the arms bigger as well. I'll cut down on the feet. And finally, I think that this character's head is a little bit too big, so I'll actually shrink in the character's head as well, and maybe add 1 height to it, adjust the eyes slightly, and there we go. We have a second silhouette, which is a slightly more elongated, slender style of character. Get creative and start playing around with different features of the body. I'm going to start off by just detailing the head first, so we can understand the process of what we're actually doing when we're detailing a silhouette. And then I will get you to try that as well for yourself before we move on to the rest of the body. All right, so when we're creating detailing, usually what we have is a shadow color, a base color, and a highlight color. I'm just going to be using colors from the color palette right here. So because we started with this dark blue on the top left, I'm just going to move 1 over, and this will be our base color. It's the second lightest color in our palette that we'll be using. So this is what I'm going to use as a base. To begin, I'll just make the entire head this base color so that we can then add in shadows and highlights onto our canvas. Now the head isn't very big, so we can't be playing around with too much right now, but just try to think of where the light source would actually be hitting this image. Because this is a top-down view and our character is facing forward, our light source is coming right above our character here. So imagine the light as if this arrow is pointing right down. That is where the light source is actually going to hit our image. And so because of this, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this next lighter color and I'm going to move 1 pixel down from the top of the head, and I'm just going to create a line right across. And the reason that I'm doing this is I want to show where the top of the head actually is, and we're giving some depth onto this character by showing a little bit behind the top of the head, showing that the character is slightly looking down towards the ground. Now, because this is behind the top of the head, this is where I will use my shadow color. So I'm going to go back to the darkest shade and shade that right there. Now, you don't technically need to show this if the character was facing completely forward, looking straight ahead. You might want to do something like this. However, because I want to show a little bit more depth, we're going to tilt the head down, showing a little bit of the back of the head. That's all we really need to do for now. So again, you're just trying to imagine where the light would actually be hitting the body. We want to create our highlights where the pieces of the body actually protrude outwards and where the light would be most intense. And we want to use shadows in the opposite place. So shadows are for where the light would be blocked by other parts of the body or are facing away from the light source. I will now be finishing off the rest of this silhouette. So the head is looking good. I'm happy with the head. The neck is also good because the neck is kind of underneath the head. It's underneath the chin, so we actually don't need to do anything at all with the neck. I can leave it completely shaded. And now we'll move into the torso. So I'll start with, again, using the base to just make sure that we're working off of something first, and we can start to see the differentiation between where the torso ends and where the hands start, or where the feet begin. So something like this is typically what I like to do for the torso. And now we can start to add in our highlights. So for this image, I'm going to line right across the top of the chest, and then we're actually just going to do the next 2 pixels down below. And the reason that we're doing this is because the top of the chest is going to protrude the most out from our body, but we do want to create a more circular defined highlight, which is why I'm not boxing this entire highlight out. I'd like to just take off these corners so we can bring it to a nice circular highlight. And honestly, for the shadow, I think all we really need to do is just outline all the way around this image so that we aren't interfering too much with the arms or the legs. Now for the hands, I'll start by just creating a little L on both sides of the hand, as again, the forearm and the top of the hand is going to be the most highlighted compared to the underside of the arm. And then just clicking Alt to grab the highlight color, I'm going to go in and add highlights to the edge of the fist, as again, very straightforward. This is the piece that is highlighted the most, as it is the farthest away from the underside of the arm. Last but not least, we do have the legs. So we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to create the base for the entire legs. There we go. So this would be where the leg portion is for our character. And I want to start off by showing off the highlights. So the feet are going to protrude out forward. So I'll just put 2 little pixels at the edge of the feet, similar to how we did with the hands. We'll do that for both sides. But we also want to highlight a little bit of this knee part of the body. So we'll do the pixels above as well. If you want to get creative, you could go all the way up the leg. But personally, I do feel like this is a little bit too much highlighting on the bottom side of the character. So I'm just going to get rid of those 2 as well. And then I'll head in with our shadow. So I'm going to grab the shadow color. And first I'll start off by shading the underside of the feet. And then we'll shade 1 pixel over in each direction as well. And so basically we're creating a separation between the top side of the foot and the bottom side of the foot. So even where the main highlight is on the foot, I'm keeping the base color as the lighting is slowly dissipating down the foot, with the back side of the foot being completely shaded. Last but not least, I'll just shade off this piece right here where the crotch is, as there wouldn't really be any kind of light here. And honestly, that's about it. That is what I would typically do for a top-down simplistic silhouette like this. And we can see just how much detail we can fit in with just 3 colors: your base color, your shadow color, and your highlight color. I'm going to create a smooth outline around my character using a black color. There we go. So that's our simple outline where I just created a black pixel around the entire edge of our character. However, we could get creative and start to play around with a few of the pointed, jaggy outline pieces. So we could actually extend the outline out if we wanted to on the feet to make the feet seem pointy. Or we could do the same thing in reverse, but with the hands, to have the hands extend out a little further. We could do the same thing on the top of the head to make it feel a little bit more boxed off. However, I do think that this image does look better with the rounded off corners on the outline of the top of the head. Now, one thing that you might notice is I did actually cut off the outline on the bottom here where the feet are actually touching the ground. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that the character feels a part of the world. And so, for example, if we were to extend this canvas quickly by going to Sprite, canvas size, and just adding a little bit onto the height of this image, we could actually create an outline around the bottom of the feet. But the problem with this is it does end up looking more like an icon rather than an actual character sitting on a piece of ground. And that's why when I'm creating characters, I will always keep the bottom of the feet open without any outlines, as I want the character to feel like a part of the world standing on the ground rather than an icon floating in the world. So now that we've talked a little bit about outlines and actually creating an outline around our character, I'd like you to challenge yourself at outlining your characters using 3 different colors. See how different colored outlines can actually influence your drawing to be seen in a new way. And I will see you in the next lecture.